want to say good evening to all the viewers and hopefully prospective voters. Welcome to the conversation tonight with 11th District Congressional candidate, Cuyahoga County Councilperson and Cuyahoga County Democratic Chair, Shontel Brown. Tonight, we are talking about the pandemic and her idea is how to beat COVID, get people vaccinated, back to work, and reboot the economy following President Biden's plan. Again, I am Tom Barris, former longtime political reporter with WKYC Channel 3. My job tonight, not to be a cheerleader or to make an endorsement, just to do what I've always done, ask questions so you can hear what the councilwoman hopes to do and then decide if she is worthy of your vote. All right, so first of all, Councilwoman, can you tell us how the pandemic has impacted you and your world, and speak about it both in personal terms and that as an office holder? What kind of things have you seen and experienced?
Well, first of all, before we jump right into that time, I just want to thank you for joining me today and taking the opportunity to moderate this conversation. The seriousness of this subject is beyond words sometimes. I mean, when we look at the numbers of over 400,000 people who have been have lost their lives to this pandemic, it is terribly, terribly, terribly frustrating and disappointing. And I've had people whose lives have been lost at my church. I have a constituent who lost parents and grandparents to this pandemic. So the effect has been very, very personal for me. The work that we are doing as a county council member has been challenging, but I think one of the things that I can say is, as a elected official and as the only elected official in this race during these unprecedented times, I have firsthand experience with dealing with the pandemic and ensuring that the resources get into the hands who have been hardest hit and who need them the most. So when we talk about that, Tom, I'm talking about over $200 million in COVID relief funds that have come from the federal government, where I've had the privilege and responsibility, probably would be a better word, of sitting at the table to make difficult decisions to determine where those resources should be allocated, going towards hospitals, small businesses, rental assistance, food banks, and job training. This pandemic has devastated and ravished communities, and as the only person in this race who is serving in public office at this time, I get calls every day. So I have a very intimate understanding of the impact this has had. So my goal is to go to Congress and be a partner to the Biden-Harris administration and Speaker Pelosi to ensure that we put the relief and recovery in the hands of the people who have been hardest hit by this pandemic.
Well, last year was a complete jumble of COVID sickness and death, a crashing economy, and emotional events like the killing of George Floyd that highlighted racial injustice and inequality. Now, we all know that Black and other communities have been hit harder by the pandemic, a greater percentage of them getting sick, going to the hospital, and dying, and a smaller percentage of them getting vaccinated now. Do you think President Biden's COVID relief plan is adequate to address these issues?
I think that the Biden-Harris administration have given it a good effort to put forth immediate recovery and relief into the hands of the people. Naturally, as you've pointed out, they've fallen short of the goal that I think they originally put in place, recognizing that we have to do a better job, particularly in communities of color. There's an expression, when white people get the cold, Black people get the flu. And this is even more evident as we deal with the devastation behind the COVID and the coronavirus. We have to really be diligent and vigilant about making sure that people are getting vaccinated. People, if you have an opportunity to get vaccinated, please, by all means, take that opportunity, because you'll be safer, your families will be safer, and our communities will be safer. This is no way for us to live. So I want to again, I can't overstate it enough that I want to be a partner to the administration and make sure that we are rolling out aggressive and strategic plans to make sure people are getting the vaccines in their communities. And so if that means that we have to make some adjustments along the way, I'm prepared to do that.
Do you think this could really be a first step toward maybe closing the healthcare gap among the people of the 11th district? I mean, we have some of the best hospitals in the world, and the people who live in the shadow of those hospitals uh, have very disparate or very inequitable healthcare situations in terms of life expectancy, very much determined by the zip code you live in, and early childhood deaths and being afflicted with chronic diseases. Do you think this could get us moving in the right direction toward more equitable healthcare?
Absolutely. I'm proud of the fact and pleased that the Biden-Harris administration has made equity a high priority. And as a person who has taken the issue of racism by the horns, if you will, having declared racism a public health crisis in this time of a pandemic, that work was done prior to this pandemic, but it has been amplified and elevated. The attention on these issues have been amplified and elevated because of the coronavirus and because of the tragic killing of George Floyd. So, yes, this is a perfect opportunity to put into practice the equitable efforts, which I am proud the Biden Harris administration have put forth.
Well, President Biden obviously came into office wanting to hit the ground running. And I think most people would agree that it's important to get whatever assistance is going to be delivered into the hands of the people, the families, the companies, the government agencies that need it. Um, should Democrats just push the whole package through without Republican support uh, to get the money where it needs to be as quick as it could possibly be delivered? Or should there be an effort to enlist more support from Republicans?
Well, I think Joe Biden has made it very clear he wants to be able to work across the aisle. But it's also no secret that we have a very thin majority at both in the Senate and the House, and that we must take advantage of that to avoid watering down the recovery package. People are hurting, Tom. People need money in their pockets, food in their table. Um, you know, being able to stay in their homes, that is the highest priority right now. So if it means that we have to take advantage of the majority that we have, then I think that's what we'll have to do.
So is it your belief that the whole package should be just passed as is intact? What do you say to those who say, well, maybe we should lower the income requirement to be eligible to get a government check, maybe from $75 to $50,000, or should extra items that are maybe outside of the main objective here, like increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour, if that will help it get through by maybe streamlining it, would that be a better route to go?
But what I would say relative to the $15 an hour, because of the devastation and the impact that this coronavirus has had on communities, it is so critical that we are also sensitive to the businesses that have also had to struggle during these unprecedented times. Businesses are closing their doors because they are unable to sustain and stay open. And so even some of the efforts that folks that have been championing this legislation for $15 an hour are taking into account that we don't want to put businesses into a position where they too might be better off. I'm sorry, worse off than they are right now. So while we have to think about those things, we may have time later to deal with some of these issues, but right now, the highest priority and the main focus has to be putting money in the hands of the people who have been hardest hit. And that means making sure that those stimulus checks gets into people's hands right now and that we extend the unemployment coverage for those folks, and also making sure that we extend the moratorium on evictions So those are the things that are the highest priority. And whatever we need to do to make sure that that happens, I intend to be a partner to the Biden Harris administration to get it done.
Well, from what you have observed personally, how efficiently and effectively do you think the vaccine is being distributed in the 11th district or not?
So it's no secret, there has been some hesitancy in the Black community about taking the vaccine. But I think as we get to a place where more people have successfully been vaccinated, that concern or fear is rapidly fading. I think the greater challenge is how do we get it into the community faster? As you pointed out at the top of this conversation, um, there are disparities in the Black community, and accessibility is one of them. We Many in some parts of the nation, they're rolling out the vaccines, and even here in grocery stores. But what about the places where they're food deserts and they don't have grocery stores? We have to be conscientious about those things and make sure that those people have access to the vaccine, because people want it. It's just a matter of accessibility. So I won't be a critic right now, because these, again, we didn't get a playbook on how to deal with this here. Um, we're taking the situation and doing the best with with it that we can. And so as a result, we need to be creative, and we need to find trusted partners to be able to help deliver the vaccine into those hard to reach areas by people that by people in the communities that they trust. And that's how we'll get a more aggressive and a better approach to distribution of the vaccine.
Do you think that there should be some changes made to distribution priorities? For instance, should essential workers like grocery workers,
Mhm.
bus drivers, childcare workers, should they be put in a higher preferential category, much like school teachers are right now?
I would definitely say so. You know what? I want to take this opportunity to thank those frontline workers, thank those people who have been keeping our nation going since this pandemic. They are putting themselves in a position, risking their lives for the benefit of our own. So, absolutely, without question, if it were up to me, they would most certainly be given higher priority, because they have, in fact, been the champions keeping our country moving forward during this difficult time.
Again, we've talked about it a bit earlier, but the reticence or reluctance perceived in the Black community, people have concerns that, well, looking back in history, we've seen some disgraceful episodes where, uh, the Tuskegee um, episodes around not giving patients treatment for a disease that was inflicted upon them. And other people that just think that, well, this vaccine has been rushed through at hyperspeed.
Hmm.
Um, do you think some of those reservations are being um, broken down or maybe overcome with all of the campaigns that we've been seeing and all the public figures who've been trying to persuade more people to take the vaccine? Are we making inroads on that, or is there still a lot of reluctance?
I believe we're making inroads. I've been finding more people, as again, as a person that's sitting in the seat as an elected official, the only candidate in this race is dealing with these issues from a governing perspective. People want the vaccine. It's just a matter of accessibility. So getting the appointments successfully done. When you are in a situation where you don't have access to Wi-Fi, when you are in a situation where you have to rely on others for your transportation, it makes it a little bit more challenging to get those appointments and get the vaccine rolled out successfully. But I do believe the barriers are coming down. I do believe people want the vaccine. I think it's incumbent upon us as as a governing body to be able to make sure that it is accessible to those who want it.
Some of the cornerstone industries of Northeast Ohio's economy, for instance, hospitality industry, hotels and restaurants, manufacturing have been among those businesses hardest hit by the pandemic. What could Congress do to help these industries rebound and try to bring back economic momentum?
in this pandemic culture, there was recently news about Governor DeWine investing. There's being about $500 million of investment in the healthcare industry, and what a better place to invest, especially when you're battling a pandemic, right? But we also have to be conscious of the displaced workers who might not have the skill sets to get them into the industries such as healthcare. What, like to your point, those manufacturing jobs. What do we do in situations like that? Well, we have to invest in job training, but we also have to be a little bit creative in our approach and consider project-based manufacturing opportunities where we can capitalize on some of the things that we just aren't heavily focused on. As I sit here in a studio to give this presentation, this will be a growing industry, particularly during this time of pandemic culture where people will want to be able to get production right here locally. So those are the type of things that we need to do and to focus on so that we can recover after this pandemic is behind us. But as it stands right now, getting the money into the people's hands is what are the cries and the concerns that I hear from people in both Cleveland and Akron. And that's where my time and energy will be focused. And that's my highest priority as I run for this seat.
You sponsored some important legislation in Cuyahoga County Council that passed, and a bill that declares racism to be a public health hazard in Cuyahoga County.
Yeah.
So skeptics or cynics would say, well, yeah, tell us something we don't know. But obviously, you think it's more than a feel-good measure. You realistically think that it will result in some meaningful changes. Talk about the changes that you see growing out of it and how soon there might be some actual tangible progress.
Wow, Tom, such a big question. So that legislation meant a lot to me, very personal. Declaring racism as a public health crisis, as you pointed out, was more than words on paper to make us feel good about ourselves. When drafting the legislation, I was very intentional and very deliberate in including statistical data that would justify getting the resources and the funding that we needed to address issues that have been affecting Black people for centuries. When we talk about the economic wealth gap, when we talk about redlining, when we talk about education, when we talk about access to quality healthcare, all of those things have permeated our lives as Black people for centuries. And so this work will not be easy. In fact, I knew it would be hard. And when I introduced the legislation, or when the idea was actually introduced to me by my colleagues on First Year Cleveland, which is a group of folks whose work have been focused on eradicating the infant mortality crisis that we face right here in this county. We've got first-class hospitals, but a third world infant mortality rate. So I've been at this work for quite some time. That work for me began in 2015, and it wasn't the pandemic, it wasn't the tragic killing of George Floyd that moved me to introduce that legislation. As a matter of fact, we started doing that work in October 2019. And then I introduced it to my colleagues around May of 2020. These things take time and they require a lot of work. But I'm proud to say, because I took the time and because I worked with my colleagues and listened to them so that we could build on the common ground, I was able to get that legislation passed with bipartisan support unanimously. And this legislation had very aggressive timelines also involved. And we also crafted it to ensure that we included the community. The community component consists of CASE, Council Advisory, the Citizens Advisory on Community Equity. And so with that, wanted to make sure that they provided us with recommendations in a very, very tight timeline, because too often legislation like this has been passed and it goes stale or nothing comes from it. And I wanted to be abundantly clear that this legislation would not be that. So it was a heavy lift, but one that I am proud of because it is much needed during this time of divisiveness and volatility. And I trust that those who are involved will continue to do the work and recognize that it is ongoing work that will take years and years, but we're up for the task.
So just practically speaking, on an everyday basis, are we talking about potential changes in hiring policies, more diligence in awarding contracts in proportionate and equitable shares? Would those be the same? Would those be some examples of the things that you would like to see growing out of this?
Absolutely. One of the things I like to point out that was also on on my mind when we crafted that legislation is I knew that we would be approaching our 5-year mark for the second round of our disparity study, and emphasis on second round. The first round we put forth had just evaluated how we were handling contracts, and that was 5 years prior to my arrival. So in 2015, that legislation was about to expire. But we put forth a community with my pushing. We put forth a community benefits agreement that was race and gender neutral, that focused on capturing small businesses and making sure that they had an opportunity to get their bite at the apple as it related to some of the contracts. Well, what we learned from this most recent disparity study is of the $1.2 billion in contract work that's awarded from the county, only $5 million went to Black business. That is not only shameful, it's embarrassing. So now we find ourselves in a position in tandem with the legislation that I passed to be able to do set asides, if you will. And set asides will give us the opportunity to set aside contracts specifically for races and gender. And that work was a 10-year process, Tom. So you have to have someone who is committed and dedicated and bird dogging this stuff from beginning to end to make sure that we can get the results that we need for the people who have been impacted the most. And I have been that person. So the same is true as it relates to the declaring racism as a public health crisis. We are introducing ideas as it relates to promotion within our organization, hiring practice within our organization, pay equity within our organization, and representation and leadership within our organization. So those are the types of things that will result from the legislation that was passed. And before we go out into the community and tell them what they should be doing, we have to make sure our own house is clean. So that's the work that I've been doing as a county council representative. And that consensus and collaboration is something I'd like to take to Congress to be able to get work done for the people in Cleveland and Akron.
This next question will give us some insight whether you're an optimist, a pessimist, or a realist, or some combination of the above. Do you think that Northeast Ohio's economy can quickly rebound from its stagnant situation, or is it going to be more of a long uphill slog and struggle for a district or a region that, frankly, is older, poorer, and less educated than many other middle moderate sized cities? Will we be able to get back to where we were? Will we be able to, make improvements on our economic health and well-being? What's your short-term and long-term outlook?
Tom, now you know me. I am a hopeless optimist. Okay, I think that the future is. I think that we have a lot of opportunity to make our economy better. I couldn't be more encouraged that we have this new administration in place, right, with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And I think that the work and the priorities that they have been focused on will be very beneficial for this region. I can't help but to celebrate and smile and beam with excitement with this opportunity is by virtue of our Congresswoman, the Honorable, the illustrious Congresswoman Marsha Fudge, soon to be Secretary of HUD's elevation. So her being in that position gives us another opportunity to bring some more resources back into the community. And I know the people in the district who have been watching me work for the last 9 consecutive years on their behalf know that if they elect me, when they elect me, but if they elect me, I will be a champion for them. And I will fight hard to make sure that we get all of the resources that we deserve. And I think the fact that we continuously rank amongst the poorest cities in the nation gives me the best platform to say, hey, we need the resources the most. And so I want the people in Cleveland and Akron to know that electing me, we will definitely have a brighter future. My relationship with the Congresswoman, it's no secret. She's been a mentor and a friend, will put me in a position to be able to pick up the phone and really advocate on our behalf and continue the legacy of the work that she's done. So I'm an optimist, Tom. I'm an optimist.
So in keeping with what you've just said, this is a very unusual race. It's not that often that you have a competitive campaign for an empty congressional seat. What makes you and your abilities? I mean, make your best case here. What makes you best suited to battle all the issues and the challenges that arose out of the pandemic?
Listen, of the candidates in the race, I can't overstate it enough. I've been at the table. I've been at the table making some of these difficult decisions as it relates to getting the resources into the hands of the community. No one else can say that. I have 9 consecutive years of legislative experience tied to working with many people in this district. As a lifelong resident, no one is more dedicated to this community than I am. I've been working closely with other elected officials and citizens in the community, quite frankly, to make sure that their issues and concerns are not only heard, but they are helped. So I believe my leadership as an elected official, coupled with the fact that I have been the chairwoman and the first woman and the first Black person ever elected to lead the largest and what I like to say the most complicated Democratic Party in this state, puts me in the best position to help the people in the 11th Congressional District get the resources that they need and to be a partner to the Biden-Harris administration. I am committed to this community and have been my entire life. And with that, I'm confident that the people will recognize who is the best choice to help them carry on the magnificent legacy of this seat. It is not lost on me, Tom. It's a big responsibility. But what I am happy to say is that my pastor likes to say, I rise to the occasion, and I don't intend for this to be any different.
So a last question here that maybe includes sort of an updated snapshot of the moment of the campaign. We are waiting for Congresswoman Fudge to be approved as Housing and Urban Affairs Secretary. And after that, then the governor can decide to set a special primary election day. So as we speak today, I believe there are 5 declared candidates in all Democrats. Your strongest opponent is raising lots of money from her connections made through backing Bernie Sanders. You are depending heavily on endorsements from local Democratic office holders and unions, and you've just gotten a batch of them. Give us your take of the moment shaping up and assessing the race.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, one of the candidates in the race has raised significant amount of money. So I will respectfully request, if you're watching this and if I've given you any compelling reason to support my candidacy and you haven't already do so, you can make donations at shontelbrown.com. But let me point this out, Tom. We know we may not be able to match her dollar for dollar, but it's the work. It's the work and the trusted confidence of the people who live here that will make the difference and that will decide who will represent them in the future. And my work and my proven track record of being collaborative, building consensus, seeking input from others, and my willingness to work as a partner has afforded me the privilege to get a lot of things done for a lot of people in a short amount of time. So as it currently stands, I think that is the primary difference in this race. And I always say this, and I can't help but point it out. But even in my past races for the seats that I've held, and I've been elected and reelected for every seat that I've held: city council, county council, and party chairwoman. I'm not comfortable even calling people competitors or opponents. These are candidates in the race that are running for the same seat. And I'm not focused on any other candidate. I am focused on me and being the best congressional candidate that I can be and expressing to people what I think they will appreciate in a representative of this 11th congressional district. So that is my focus. and that will continue to be my focus. So no matter how crowded the race gets, I've been in crowded races before, and I'm probably one of the only candidates in the race that can say they have a track record of being undefeated. So we want to keep it that way, Tom.
All right, Councilwoman, technical issues notwithstanding, that's a wrap. We'll have another conversation with the councilwoman on another specific issue in 2 weeks. So thanks to all of you for tuning in. I'm Tom Barris. Stay safe, be well, do good.
Thank you, Tom. And remember, go to ShontelBrown.com. You can sign up to make a donation or volunteer.
She's a go-getter, a hard worker, tireless, not one to get worn down. These are turbulent times, quite turbulent, right? So you need folks that understand what the mission is and then be able to work with other folks to get it done, right? That's what we need.
Yeah, we need some common sense, and we need things to calm down on both sides.
We may never see an hour like we're living in again. I definitely pray for better days, but we need good leaders, strong leaders, and dependable leaders.
This is the time is right for Shontel. This is the perfect time that we have someone like a Shontel Brown running for Congress. She has the leadership skills, she has the compassion, she has the temperament to deal with diversity, she has the temperament to deal with challenges that may come her way, and I'm quite sure they will come, but she's the best person for the job. She's a community connector, she's a problem solver.
Everything that Shontel does, she takes this visionary approach to things and always wants to be very positive. And certainly Shontel is going to have a lot of work to do in D.C. to change a lot of that stuff. The ongoing work of outgoing Congresswoman Marcia Fudge will be continued by Shontel, and she'll do a great job in her role there.
Empathetic. I think she feels for, not just the community, but for us as a nation, and she wants to see us come together. That's going to be a huge challenge, but I think she's up for it.
So, you want to learn more about my campaign? Then follow me on my social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.